Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Spark Animation Festival, where we are carrying on with our Meet the Filmmakers series. My name is Keith Blackmore, and it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Cinzia Angelini. Now, our audience is just getting to know Cinzia through her film Mila, but Cinzia, you're an animation veteran. You've worked on all kinds of 2D and 3D work as a story artist for many major studios. Maybe you could just tell us a bit about yourself, your background, some of the productions you've worked on.
Yeah, I'm originally from Italy. I started in animation in Milano, and then after a few years in Europe, I had the chance to move to Los Angeles, where I'm currently living. And the first major studio was DreamWorks, and I started as a 2D animator on Prince of Egypt. That was a fantastic experience. And then I stayed at DreamWorks during the 2D times throughout. So Prince of Egypt and El Dorado, and then Sinbad and Spirit first, and then Sinbad. And then in 2000, after Pixar came out with Toy Story, all the major studios wanted to move to CG experiments, see if they could do it, and so on, and start to look at the pipelines. And so at DreamWorks, they started training 2D animators to see if they could transition to 3D. And I was one of the first ones, guinea pigs, volunteers to wanting to try. I love a 2D, but I also love challenges, and I love to learn new things. So I felt like it was a good thing for me to get to know this new for the time, way of animating. And so I got the training at DreamWorks, and I worked on already on Spirit a little bit. I was doing mostly the 2D horse. I was on James Baxter's team on Spirit, and then I started to do some background CG. And then on Simba, it was the other way around, basically, where I was doing mostly 3D and some 2D, and I would get the shot where we had 3D and 2D mixed up because I could do both, like some of the other animators that train in 3D. So it was super interesting. And then I had a chance to go to Sony and work on my first and only live action VFX Spider-Man 2, the 2004 one. And I stayed at Sony for a few years and then moved from quite a bit around. I went to Disney, and then I had a short experience at Warner Brothers that was great on a short project. Duncan Studio as well, and then Illumination. I transitioned, and eventually around 2009 to storyboarding. I fell in love with the story process. I wanted to know more about story, and I started training myself as a story artist, and eventually ended up at Illumination working on the Minions and the Speak Me 3 and so on. Where I met Dave Rosenbaum, he was there, and when he moved to Cinesite, I kind of followed him a few months later, and I've been at Cinesite for 4.5 years now, starting as a board artist, head of story, and now I'm directing a hit pick for them. So super exciting.
Wow, what a journey. You are a true veteran, animation veteran. A lot of productions there. That's amazing. So then, now, how did you come to, and what made you decide to approach this film, Mila?
So around 2007, 8, I felt like was ready to, do my own film. I did a little, student film, of course, when you're in school, but like as a professional. So I pitched around a few ideas to colleagues and friends and also studios. And everybody was really attracted by this story about war, even if, these days, I think platforms and studios are, especially in Europe, but here too, they're starting to explore animation for more adult themes and more difficult subjects. That is absolutely fantastic, and I love it. But 10 plus years ago, it was a little bit, so I was still pitching Mila at the feature animation, studios, and but even if I knew it was very hard to sell a project and get a green light for a short that talks about war, I saw that, of course, my colleagues and friends, but also executives, really intrigued by the story. So, I said, okay, I have something here. I really wanted to keep going. And it was very personal because it was inspired by a story that my mom always told me that is more like how she felt during the bombings, more than an actual story. How she felt like completely frozen by fear and terrified until somebody would pick her up and run to shelter, otherwise she would just stay there. So this, even if a kid is not like physically hurt, as I was growing up, as I was witnessing, unfortunately, wars that were happening, like the Balkan War in the 90s when I was a young woman, and so on, or Rwanda. And I was always thinking back about this story, how my mom felt and how those kids would feel, and how the kids now in Afghanistan and in Yemen and so on would feel. So I really felt it was like a universal sentiment of fear that happens to our kids. And I just wanted to write a story about this. So I used a lot of the stories from the family, things that happened to other members of the family, to my grandmother, my grandfather, and so on. And I built a story around Mila because, just being frozen by fear is not really something that you want your main character to do. You want your main character to really change the story and the people around her in this case. So I just built a story full of inspiration, from stories that actually happened.
Yeah, so the girl in this story, Mila, is your mother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mila is my mom. It's inspired by her, especially how she felt during the bombing. And still to the day, when, for example, the 4th of July, we have the bombers go by as, she freezes, like she's like freaks out completely, and she's 82. So, and she was not affected so heavily as other kids are, because after a few days of bombing, they escaped up in the mountains for 2 years. So she wasn't under the bombs for like, years, like some kids are. But still, she's still been very affected, like loud noises of people screaming completely, brings her back to those days.
Well, let's talk about the theme later, but I want to talk about how you got into this production. So you brought it up, and you start. The seed of it is in 2007. You approach some of your studio bosses. You pitch it to them. What was the result when you pitched it to your bosses? They liked the idea. They loved the idea, but
Tap on my shoulder. Good luck. until 2019, when Cinesight, that I was already working for, heard about the story. They knew about it. I had a pitch at the studio, and they're just a different group of people, and they just loved the story, how we put it together with the hundreds of volunteers working from 35 countries, for almost 10 years. They loved, really to be part of that. And they came on board. They had a gap in between Adam's Family 1 and 2, and they made it happen. And they actually, picked it up from animation. We were finishing up animation with the volunteers, but they really helped on quite a few shots, and then effects and CFX and all the rendering, of course, compositing, all kind of the last part of the production. As volunteers, we did render one full sequence, at Pixel Cartoon that is in Italy, actually in Trento, a studio in Trento that was with us from the very beginning. But if you see Mila, it's really challenging and ambitious production for a volunteer, approach. So having Cinesa chiming in during the last year was really essential, and it was great. They brought us to the finish line in a wonderful way.
well, you've bookended it. We've seen the beginning, now we know the end. But there was a big journey in those 10 years
Oh,
because,
I know.
I mean, you had crowdfunding. Now, how did you utilize that? And tell us about how did you go about getting 350 animators in all these different continents to work? How did you do that? How did you organize that? It's crazy.
So first of all, my special accent, attracts so many people. Right? No. Um, it was never planned to, and end up this way. I just started with this like desire to do a film, and then friends and colleagues were attracted by it, and they just said, "Hey, I love to help. What can I do?" I said, "Guys, I have no budget, nothing. We actually did a little bit at the studio of production, together, a test shot. And then I stopped for a year. It was 2008. I had my second kid. So I almost not forgot about Mila, but, it was kind of in limbo. And then people started calling me. It's like, how are we doing, Mila? It's like, I have no money, I have no budget, I have no studio. I mean, nothing. Like, well, I can model, I can rig, I can do that. Like, okay. So we just started like that, and then by word of mouth, people were
So
so.
it goes from 20 to 50 to 100 to 350. So how did you organize them?
So in 2010, I had the fortune to meet Andrea Ems, and she's the producer. She has been with me,
Yeah.
and she's amazing. And so basically, the two of us were organizing most of the production and everything. And if I was busy, she was there. If she was busy, I was there, and we were like really were there, and really learning as we were going and changing as we were failing or whatever. So
Well, you're inventing it as you go along because you did not have done
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely, and we had to keep up with technology too. At the beginning, we had Skype 01. I don't remember, but really nothing. We had a forum that Andy Graham, one of the executive producer from London, had. So he gave us like a private section of that, but it was a lot of login and password. It was nothing interactive as what we have now with the apps. When we moved to Slack in 2016, I think. Oh my God, it was such a great, improvement in just the way of communicating and giving notes and uploading files. And, it's just such a, so I don't know how many millions of emails I must have sent in 10 years. Uh,
Right? I could
yeah,
imagine. And then along the way, you're having to raise money because you can't just do this on out of air. You have to get funding. So then you have a crowdfunding going on?
Yeah, we had, so the first funds we got was from like a regional film commission in Trento that
Hmm.
helped the studio in Trento to get going basically. But if you look at Mila and the quality of what it takes, really the funds we had, even with the crowdfunding, helped. But this was possible only because everybody was volunteered. We helped with
Yeah.
some computers. Paying for some specific little things, some marketing as we were going, because of course, even the support of the press has been like, essential also to spread the word and keep this flood of people coming our way. Because when you work with volunteers, you need to basically, you can't set a deadline. You need to be very patient. You need to learn and to work around it, and it's a great school actually for even your professional career, but you need to multiply time by 10 basically. It's
Yeah.
pretty much, it came down to that. um, so we had people that texture the half of the film maybe, but then you have people that do one prop. So it's really keeping up with this very diverse group of people that help push forward. So you need to constantly have people coming in and do something. And some people stay for 10 years, like it happened, and some stay for a month, but they give you something. That's why we come up with like credits that are like fair to everybody, full
Mm.
credit or additional credit depending on what people did.
So you must have been so overjoyed when Cinesight stepped in. It's like, thank you, thank you. And then they took it across to help you bring it across the finish line.
Oh my God, I almost literally fell back, like I was in
Right?
Tennessee and I was having dinner with one of the executive producer, Warren Franklin, that is actually
No,
a
Warren, sure. Good friend of ours, that's
and
Spark.
it's awesome. And we had, we're having dinner. It was me and my daughter and him and his wife. And he leaned forward at one point. It's like, Cinzia, look, I'm not supposed to tell you yet, but we're going to finish Mila. I almost fell off my chair. Like, what? So that's how it happened. That was June 2019, the last Tennessee I went to. Yeah, and then it was a huge challenge on their part, really to be able to absorb a pipeline that was very volatile, to say the least, because we're across, so many countries,
Like, I could imagine what's going on there.
so
That's,
many people, so many different computers, machines across 10 years with programs that changed, So, but the Nate Barnard is a VFX super in Vancouver for Mila, and did an amazing job. And Tara Kemps also and Tamara Butcher. Everybody in Vancouver just adopted me and Mila, and they say, "Okay, it's crazy, but that's at least how Tara puts it. You're gonna make it work," and they did. They did. It was really challenging, but they did a fantastic job.
yeah, no, absolutely. And that they got behind that theme. I'm so pleased that they did. Now, going back to that theme, very, very personal. But this, the film is about a girl that's caught up in the atrocities of World War II,
Yeah.
based on your mother, your grandmother, and the other characters. You mentioned, touched on, so what are some of the specifics that happened to them that you used in the film?
For example, a story that my grandmother always told me, how she went for groceries in the center of town, and their house is across the river on the other side of the bridge. And as she was crossing with the grocery, with not my mom actually, but with her sister, she was like two and very heavy and chubby, and this poor woman tries to. And sure enough, the sirens go off, and she sees the planes coming up from the valley, and she could not walk fast enough. It's a pretty wide bridge, but a neighbor stopped with the bicycle and helped her to the other side. And like in Mila, they crossed, and the bridge was bombed. So that shot is in the film. And other, for example, I actually gave an homage to my grandmother's name, that is Luisa. There is a shot at one point where Mila is looking, in the house of the stranger, kind of, looking around, and there is the camera stops for a second on like a sewing machine. And of course, I couldn't use the Singer, brand name, but I called it Luisa. Like my grandmother she was great at, she was showing, creating incredible clothes for me too when I was a kid. So that's a bit of an homage to her on what this woman does.
How do you think growing up with a mother that it had that experience, those traumatic events, how has it impacted you as a person and as an artist?
I just am really fortunate because my mother is an artist herself. So, and I think art helps a lot people that go through trauma like that. It's such an
Mm.
important thing to have, and I always had it since I was a kid. So, and in terms of the stories, I think it makes you realize what you have and really be happy with your life. I've heard so many war stories of, like, my grandmother's friends, that would die just because she was working at night and with the candle, and she forgot to close the curtains. And so they had this playing at night, they call it people for whatever reason. And he was just going around scanning for a light and just dropping a bomb randomly.
Yeah.
And that's how my grandmother's friend died. I don't know, just stories that are making you more aware of the world, of what's happening around. When you have news of a war from the other side of the planet, because of you heard of these stories, even if you didn't live it yourself, you're like you empathize more with the people, and you're more aware of what might be happening.
Yeah, it's a story of not tragedy, but of hope and perseverance. Now, as it's opening up to so many audiences through festivals and such. Will children have a chance to view Mila, to
Yeah,
experience? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I already screened it to many, many kids. I went in a long tour in Italy during the summer, following Mila to festivals, and we won the Gifoni. That's a big festival, and the most important special thing of this festival is, like, all the jury are kids. So we
Oh,
had
wow.
two screenings of 300 kids each, so 600 total, and And after the screening, you have a Q&A, and they're so cute. They line up. That it was 10 plus category, so 10, 12-year-old kids. They line up in the theater and they come out to the microphone and give you, like they compliment you or they ask you questions. And like there are critics. Like there was a kid that was like, I wanted to hire him. It was like, whoa, 12-year-old body, but a 20-year-old, brain, incredible. And they selected Mila, and he was running with like live action at 2, and I was super happy about that. But they love it. They really understand what we want to say, and it was really incredible experience to hear how much kids and I'm convinced kids can take so much more than we think. They process things in
Yeah.
a different way, and they're way more mature in that sense that we think. So it's good to bring them like stories that make them think and empathize with other kids on the other.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we can't hide these facts from them, especially in today's world. 50% of the victims of war are children, and they're impacted so heavily. And for us to ignore that story and to ignore those statistics would be wrong. So your film is valuable. It has an impact on many people. So the message that you want, what would you say? What is the message that you hope viewers will take away from the film?
I think there are like almost multiple messages, for the kids and the kids that have been impacted in the past, and they watch maybe as adults, or um, kids that are currently in wars. I don't know if they'll ever have a chance to see Mila while they're in wars, actually, but to give like a hope, a sense of hope for their future, but also a message to adults, and getting them to be responsible. And I know that there is a sense of not being able to do anything, even with Afghanistan, or
Yeah.
Yemen, WhatsApp. But we can, we have so much power. And my message is like, if you want to change things, you look around and you have the power to connect to your representative, to demand a change. If we all do it, if we all refuse to go with it, to accept what they're doing for money most of the time, I think the people need to be aware of the power they have in their hands, and sometimes they forget.
Interesting what you said there, because I was thinking of a quote I read yesterday, and it came to mind when I was preparing to talk with you. And the quote was, "It's impossible to imagine other people doing the things that you yourself could never do." And that's what these people are doing in war. And then the addition to that was, it was because of power. Power was the oxygen. Power was their oxygen to keep them going, and money. And it's sad because we see the suffering that is the effects of war, and not only on your family, my family, other families, very directly, not just in the past. And it still reverberates down to today, and it's happening today, as you mentioned, in Afghanistan and Yemen. So it's so vital that you're sharing this. So if you were before some jury and you had to win, well, I'd like to think, when you look back at this long journey that started in 2007, who would you thank for help along the way?
It's Mila is really like a story within a story. It's not just the story of Mila, of what happened to my mom, of the message. It's also like powerful because it shows what artists and group of people can do uh, if they all work together. It's like an orchestra, when it's perfectly at sync, there is nothing that can stop it, and they can perform anything. It's kind of what happened with Mila. It's truly a story within a story. It's not just a film, but it's like incredible, thing that happened just on its own. And I think the secret behind the project is like the theme. If Mila was a fun project that are fantastic and I love it, and I've been working in animation and doing fun films for almost 30 years, but I don't think it would have moved really an army of people. It's the theme of Mila and what people really have inside, on their own time as a volunteer they want to say, they want to change things, they want to talk about things that are powerful and make a hopefully the future a better place.
Oh, some excellent thoughts, and your film is beautiful, and we look forward to sharing it with many, many more at our festival, and we hope that we'll be able to share it for the years to come as well. It has an impact on people. Thank you very much for joining us, Cinzia. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.